promised. Everyone okay? Yeah, does anyone need to get a warm drink or anything, or have to go straight to the what about lighting? Or is you happy with the light as it is? Little more ambiance. Ambiance. Yeah. Right, okay. Hopefully, if my IT skills are up to scratch. Let me know if anyone can't see or hear this, and I'll adjust the settings.
In this video, we're going to compare the effect of varying the fuel type and quantity, and also the amount of ventilation the fire gets. We're going to see which has a greater impact. I'm going to illustrate it with this box, which is a scale model of a bungalow, and I can remove the front and the rear walls. To start with, we're going to have a fuel load, which is 1 tray of candles. And you'll see that as soon as I put the back wall in place, the candles dip slightly, and we've got the candles laying back towards the back of the box as the air is coming past to try and feed the candles at the rear of the glass box. If I start closing down the amount of ventilation that fire can get, then the candles will dip further, and the ones at the front will be laying flatter, and the ones at the rear are going to start struggling for oxygen. So we've lost 1 candle at the back, another one that's way out, second one going, and the more that I close down the ventilation, the more of those tea lights are going to go out. And if I close down the ventilation to about the size of a domestic door, then what we get is 5 tea lights that are alight. 4. Okay, so we've got 4 tea lights that are alight. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce double the fire loading, and we'll see what effect that has on the size of the fire. Okay, so twice as much fuel. As soon as I put the back wall in place, candles at the rear are going to struggle for oxygen, and they're going to start going out. Even with that whole front wall gone, there's not enough oxygen getting into that compartment to maintain that level of combustion. We've already lost 5 candles. If I close down the ventilation a little bit more, then we'll lose more. And the more I close down the ventilation, the more the tea lights are going to be extinguished. If I close it down to a similar size to it was before, so kind of a domestic door type size, then we're down to 4 tea lights alight. So we've doubled the fuel load, but with the same ventilation profile, we've got exactly the same size fire. We're going to look at what would happen. Let's imagine this is an arson fire, and our arsonist isn't happy with this level of fire development. So it comes back with a bucket of methylated spirits and throws that into the fire compartment. Now, you may or may not be able to see it, but we have got a little bit of meth still alight in the doorway. Still just about burning, but the candles have all gone out. And the reason for that is that the quick flare-up of the methylated spirits has burnt up oxygen and has extinguished that fire. So the fire's gone out completely now, so by throwing in a bucket of flammable liquid, we've actually extinguished that fire. And the reason why we've doubled the fuel but ended up with a similar amount of fire, and why we've thrown in flammable liquid and ended up with leaving less fire, is that the proper term for combustion is oxidation. It's a rapid oxidative process. A fire is an oxygen burning machine, and in a compartment, that oxygen level is restricted. The more we restrict it, the smaller the fire is going to be. Once the oxygen level in a compartment has been lowered by the fire to 15% or below, you cannot have flame and combustion in that compartment. The fire will either drop to a smolder or it will go out. Now, just to test the system further, I'm going to add quite a lot more of the flammable liquid. So for this situation, we've got one tray of candles, obviously, and a tray of methylated spirits. So the methylated spirits is obviously gassing off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close down the compartment in a similar way, in a similar amount that we did earlier. So we know what's going to happen. The candles are going to start struggling for oxygen. As soon as those candles start going out, I know that I've got an underventilated condition in this compartment. And we might think that's a highly volatile environment because we've got naked flames right next to a flammable liquid. And we're going to introduce another one now. But actually, it's a surprisingly stable environment because the oxygen level is low. So I'll just put the candle out. The low level of oxygen and the fuel-rich environment means that it is surprisingly difficult to ignite that fuel. Okay, so the methylated spirits is ignited, it's flared up, burnt up lots of oxygen, extinguished all the tea light. And it's burned up so much oxygen that the fire's gone out entirely. So if I just light that again, it'll be a lot easier this time because there's more oxygen in the compartment. If we imagine now, again, that our homeowner has had a fire, they've run out, they've left the door open. And if the first thing we do when we arrive is to go to the other side of the property and open another door, then we're going to get more fire. If that causes the window to fail, at the front, let's say, then we get more fire. And the more windows and doors that either fail or get opened, the more fire we get. If we turn up and it looks like this, well, the first thing we did was close some windows and doors, if that's an option that's available to us. Then we're going to have a smaller fire. A smaller fire does less damage, causes less risk to us, less risk to the occupier. And it also needs less water to extinguish it, so there's less water damage. And if we close the ventilation down completely, then the fire will go out. Okay, that's it. The purpose of the video is just to have a look at the relative importance of fuel type, fuel quantity versus the ventilation type and quantity. We often consider the amount of fuel and the type of fuel to be the key factors in how a fire is going to develop. But actually it can often be that the amount of ventilation is the number one priority. And in a compartment fire or a building fire, where the fire is burning away the oxygen, it will often be the most important factor. So yes, we have to consider the type and the quantity of fuel, but the ventilation is something that not only is often more important, but something we've got more control over. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Thoughts, guys?
Good, shut up,
now go home. No, you can't go home. Okay, guys, so any points of interest in there for you? You know, anything you felt that maybe made you think about something you hadn't thought of before, or anything just highlighted, well, I kind of knew that, but that's a good way of showing it? No?
That's good visualise.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like to write a few things down, because I'm a big fan of that video, personally, but I would because I'm a trainer. But things that stick in my mind, so I think it really emphasises well the size of the fire, so it doesn't really matter the size of the fuel load inside the compartment, so that bit where he puts the second amount of lit tea lights into the compartment, then shuts the ventilation down to the size of a normal door, which is a bit strange because it's very tall and lean door, wasn't it? I think it means in volume, not necessarily in the shape. But we get the same size fire, so it reduces exactly down to the same size fire we had earlier on, even though there's more fuel load. So it's definitely showing the direct link to the amount of oxygen available to sustain a certain size fire. What about the methylated spirit? Honestly, in the room now, I was a little bit surprised that when the methylated spirits got thrown on, that the fire went out. I know I was. I'm not being funny. I've been to CFBT for nearly 10 years. And the first time I saw that video, I thought, I'm sure I was expecting that. In reality, you expect it to flare up a little bit more than that before it actually put the fire out. But I think that was a really good demonstration, again, of showing the direct link between the oxygen available and the amount of combustion that could be sustained within the compartment. So he threw the methylated spirits on there, added a flammable material to the compartment, and the fire went out. I think that was quite. We're not advocating you guys turn up and start throwing methylated spirits on fires, by the way. Stick with the water, it's much safer. Okay, so I'm going to try and expand your knowledge here now and get into a thing outside the box. The mess versus the candle. So when he set up the room, as it were, or the glass building, with the methylated spirits tray in there, and then the 4 candles that were burning to him, we had 4 candles burning on the right hand side. Then put his lid stick in, went out the first time. The second time, the methylated spirits lit and the candles went out. Do you remember? Why did that happen?
Different fuel types. So different fuel types, the mess gives off the fuel easier than the candle.
That's a really good point, and I mean it's a very important point.
Is it fuel rich by having that?
Well, it's more, as Mark's saying, it's more about the temperatures of those 2 fuels. So paraffin, which is the main constituent of the tea lights, has a higher flame point, or a higher point where it's going to set light, than what methylated spirits has, and the main ethyl alcohol, I think, was a lower flame point. So it will set light at a lower temperature. That's a really good point, and well point, good for pointing that out, Mark. But why also, I mean, apart from that reason, why also didn't it, if there was enough oxygen to support that amount of combustion in the compartment, why did it just stay as it was? I know we've got a lower flame point, that's the important part of the process, but why did it just maintain what was going on? There was another thing going on as far as where the methylated spirits was.
Near the ventilation point.
Spot on, Carl, yeah? So where it was placed within the compartment, we had 2 reasons why that overcame that process that was already in the compartment. We had combustion in an area with a higher a fluid, if you like, that had a higher flammable range or flammable point further away from the ventilation, and we introduced a flame point of a lower temperature nearer the ventilation point that then took over. So that's really important as far as advocating analysing ventilation and where you're most likely to get combustion within the compartment. Where in the real world might that be applied? Can you think of anything? Not in your real world necessarily, but everyone's real world. It's a firefighting technique, but not in your jobs. Where might they utilise something
with the oil wells or
with oil wells, yeah.
with your back burning on forest fires?
Back burning on forest fires, yeah. So where they actually, has any the old Red Adair film, you ever seen Red Adair? He used to run up and throw, I'm not sure if he's done it like that.
Blow up it, yeah, he used to,
Yeah,
basically
basically
crane,
throw-
wasn't it? It's put an explosive device on the end of a crane.
Yeah,
Basically burn
explosive
oil.
device down into the oil well, you know, so if they had an oil well that lit, they put an explosive device down into the channel, get it to explode, it would utilise all the oxygen available, and the burning oil would go out. Okay, so the same process and means of firefighting without applying any passive there, that's just about restricting the oxygen. So it is actually applicable in the real world, although not necessarily in the real world. So what do you think the last bit, where he starts, you know, the trays are light and then he's closing and opening doors? What's the point do you think he's mainly trying to get across, or what maybe what we're trying to get across mainly? Do you think he's really advocating, he does mention it, but coming along and shutting doors down, shutting windows down? He does mention it, we're not really trying to say, turn up the outside of a building and shut windows and then you might get the fire more under control. That might be a thought process with a compartment. If you turn up to a compartment that's well aligned, you want to protect an egress point, close it down, and withhold the fire for a while, maybe keep it at a lower point so you can attack it easier. But with the outside of a building, what is he more importantly saying? Don't do.
Smash windows.
Don't smash windows. And don't ventilation points, right? Okay, so basically what we're advocating is that if a ventilation profile is in process and you've got a relatively small fire, then get everything you need in place first before you start smashing windows and then opening doors wide to create flow paths and extra ventilation to that fire that's burning. And if I'm trying to give you a scenario that might have happened, I don't know, Hoarder fires, quite big in your job at the moment, in your roles. Anyone attended the Hoarder's fire? No? Not always, but as a scenario, what kind of often happens, and I've been in a lot of discussions like this, is when people first turn up, what you'd expect to see is quite a lot of lack of visibility, a lot of smoke, very little limited amount of flame. Yeah, obviously loads of stuff piled up high with magazines and compartments. So you've got a fire in a heavily fuel-laden room that isn't burning very well. Why is it not burning very well? Lack of ventilation. All the stuff that's packed in the compartment has reduced the amount of oxygen in the compartment, particularly if that door's shut, and then it's limited ventilation from windows shut. Yeah, so even where the normal process in this room, if I could get going really quite well, there's not that amount of oxygen available because of the amount of fuel comes in. As a process, again, thinking about as an officer in charge perhaps in that scenario, the normal process would be, oh guys, there's a fire over there somewhere, can't quite get to the signal thing. What would be the normal process of thought there? Start emptying it all out, hucking it all out the door, yeah? Let's have some more, out the window, if we can manage it. Open the window, throw it out. Suddenly, by the time you get to the corner of the compartment, what are you likely to have? A fire, yeah? Because what you've done is reintroduce the oxygen back into the compartment. So I'm not saying that, that's got to be a process of how to get to the fire, obviously. But again, just because you've got that small, almost indistinguishable fire at the start, still take the media you're going to need in, that when you finally get there, you might need a bit more than you thought you needed at the start. So where you might come into the room initially with a bucket of water, take the hose reel, so that by the time you get near to it, you've got something decent to dampen that fire that may reinvigorate by the amount of oxygen you're applying to it. Does that all sound a good idea? Yeah? Good. That flick again. Any more questions, guys? Any questions from yourselves on what you've seen? Anything you want to add? Relatively interesting stuff? Improvement on maybe the last 10 years? Yeah. Hopefully. Okay, so I'm just going to clarify this last point and then we'll break for some tea. So the induction and reduction of air. The induction of air can have a short-term cooling effect, thus taking energy away from the fire. This may have the effect of slowing down the rate of combustion for a short time, okay, while the fire recovers. If this occurs as part of firefighting tactic, then rapid application of water should be carried out before the fire has a chance to become sanitary. So it's about tactics. We're not saying don't have a ventilated compartment to go and fight fire. What we're saying is make sure you've got what you need here before you do that. You're going to get a little bit of help by the oxygen you're going to put in there for a little while. It's not going to last very long. By deliberately restricting the supply of oxygen to the fire, you can reduce the fire size and intensity and ventilation. We'll cover that a bit more in depth later on. But as a starting point, would it make sense maybe to consider that when you make entry into a building, a little bit of door control initially might be worthwhile, even advocating someone maybe in BA to control that door and control the amount of ventilation going into the fire until they find the seat of the fire. So you've not got a wide open building, you're not opening the building up with a fully open door until the seat of the fire is located. Do you think that might be something worthwhile doing? Yes, no? You don't have to agree. There's no
going to know where the fire is and what's involved initially, are you?
No, that's right. So what I'm trying to say is until you locate that fire, by restricting the amount of ventilation, the chances are when you locate it, hopefully you're going to maintain a smaller fire. It's going to be a smaller fire to find.
It depends on what, you know, it's going to depend on a lot of things. What the, how it is inside, the size of the thing, sometimes might be there to let some of the smoke out, improve visibility, improve conditions. Actually, let the fire build up a little bit, so you can go, right, it's over there.
Yeah.
You ain't got to kill three BA crews crawling through hot and shitty conditions,
A fair
trying
point.
to find something with a tick.
A fair point, and as I say, that's what, do you remember I said right at the start, and that is a really good point. But I remember at the start I said it was as much about DRA as about what you practice. So that would be a decision you'd make as a crew manager. Sorry, we're not crew
I'm
managers
not a crew
anymore.
manager,
You're not,
I'm
you're a legal
firefighter
firefighter now.
to legal firefighter.
I never made it. I was a state crew manager, unfortunately. I would prefer to come out as a legal firefighter. But,
Gone full circle. Gone full circle.
gone full circle. Yeah, so part of your considerations would be, so that might be, well, we've got a difficult superfire to find, so we might encourage that process and make it a bit easier to find the fire. But I would say what goes hand in hand with it is that risk versus benefit, isn't it? What you're going to have is a hot fire when they find it, and obviously the necessarily sort of the safety precautions that go along with that. So you've got to take into account the crews are necessarily going to get a little more heat when they're getting there. But as long as they understand that and it's a decent route process, then it might be worthwhile. If you don't know where the seat of fire is, I would advocate maybe leaving the ventilation at a shorter point. Would advocate maybe a little bit more difficult to find, but a cooler fire when you get there. It's a consideration. We're not advocating you definitely do it. It's again information or showing, say, knowledge is power, isn't it? Having options to what you turn up to is often the best way. You look like
No, just think, yeah, again, like you don't get blinkered, don't you? Especially if
Yeah.
you've been in for a while. You're
Yeah.
not like, let's get in there, blah, blah, so you're not necessarily thinking that way, are you?
Yeah.
You just want to get there and...
You just want to get there straight away, yeah, of course you do. And again, I mean, a tactic that I learned, I was very privileged recently, Babcock put me on a positive ventilation course, or a tactical ventilation course. And what you can utilise in those areas where you're restricting the amount of ventilation into a compartment is you'll get a very definitive air tract. So the air stream that is going in, that you're allowed to go in, because it's a limited amount, it really does create a really clear air tract. And you can actually utilise that. That will go directly to the base of the fire because that's where it's going to. So in the right use of the tick and your torches, you can actually follow an air tract to locate the seat of the fire in that scenario. So that's again about maybe further training, that kind of thing, and utilising those skills or passing those skills on to people. So that's a method to find the fire where visibility is a little bit more difficult, but it's still a worthwhile method what you suggested. Guys, I'll go through the group discussion and say it's time for tea. Do you all agree? Right, okay, so carrying on where we were earlier. We'll move on to sort of modern fire scene. If you remember this morning, I discussed a little bit about the changes in the modern fire scene and why that might lead towards creating some problems for firefighters when they turn up to incidents initially. I'm not going to go into too much depth on this first screen because I know it begins to repeat a bit later on, but just looking at it as an overall view, what would you say, considering what today's delivery is about, the main difference between the two is?
More potential openings.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of hitting at. So, in essence, ventilation. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of differences, and we'll discuss them a bit more in depth. But a traditional building had a lot more open ventilation, yeah? So where would you normally find that kind of ventilation in an old building? Windows, yeah, air bricks, yeah. So it encouraged ventilation. You used to get them low down air bricks in your underneath your flooring to make sure you didn't get too much mould. And then quite open gaps in your flooring to allow airflow to come through to try and avoid that build up of mould, etc. Where else? Sash windows, someone mentioned the windows, so we've got a lot more secure modern builds. We've got the aluminium style windows or the plastic windows with double glazing, sometimes triple glazing, encouraging a lot less ventilation through them. They sometimes have the very small drip vents today, but even then limited. There's a big old sash windows back in the day, used to rattle in the windows, didn't they? Allow quite a lot of air through, sometimes only singularly glazed, so not airtight.
Louvers used to have? Louvers?
Louvers, yeah, louvers, definitely.
British drafting.
Yeah, nice open window basically into your house. What else?
Chimneys?
Chimneys, there you go, so chimneys, yeah. So those that still had the chimneys, you know, it's a nice open vent for ventilation to leave and come into the compartment. Because most of those are restricted in the modern build. For what reason?
Green.
Yeah, the green image, yeah, trying to make it easier to heat your homes and not lose so much heat your carbon footprint, as the modern phrase goes. So, 2 megawatts, and I was trying to say 2 megawatts can bring a room to flash over. You don't have to remember that, guys. It's a nice phrase. All you need to remember is we're going to put that into context, but that's the amount of energy required to flash a room over. So, somewhere in the room, what kind of item of furniture do you think might give off 2 megawatts?
This piece of paper.
In front of you there's a magic piece of paper with something alive that says 2 megawatts on it. So a chair. So really, in a medium-sized compartment as this, just an armchair will deliver enough fuel, enough heat to bring a room of this size towards flashover. It's not a lot, is it? Yeah, and just to back that up in emphasis, have you all been in the firehouse here? Yeah, 2 megawatts. Yeah, you've all been in there when we've done our fire development thing. You sit there and just let it all go over. It flashes over, doesn't it? Quite
Most
nicely.
of them fire retardant, or supposed to be fire retardant now.
Fire retardant is the important point. Yeah, it does restrict the fire for a while, but once it does break down, as it will do, it's only resistant.
Yeah.
Then actually the modern fibres underneath burn a lot quicker and release a lot more hazardous materials, and that's the problem, which we'll go on to in a little bit more depth in a little while. But as far as 2 megawatts, yeah, the loading we put, our ISP board we put in that you'll be dealing with tomorrow, that we used to flash a room over in with our demos, as we used to call them, 2 megawatts, that's all. And we used to produce plenty of dancing angels, as we used to call them back in the day, yeah. So just as a point of reference, 3.5 megawatts from a 3-chair sofa. So again, quite one of those inside a room like this is going to bring a room to a flash over even quicker. Put your 3-piece in there around, be it a bedroom with all the other furnishings, you start to see that it doesn't take a lot of furnishings or fuel loaded in the compartment to release the energy you need in a room to bring it to flash over. So flash over is basically a definite outcome. The amount of fuel loading is going to, and the dynamics of the compartment is going to affect the speed of that flash over, but you're going to kind of get a flash over in every compartment unless it's ventilation controlled and doesn't allow the heat to build up to that degree. So there we go. So now we can talk a bit more about the modern building and its thermodynamics. So what are the hazards, what are the benefits of these modern builds? And I'm going to defer to anyone in the room who does charitable work for people and does a lot of DIY at home and has some knowledge of this area. But what kind of things are there in
A lot of insulation.
insulation? Yeah, so straight away insulation's gone over. We used to open up our own walls, you have lava plaster with a big gap behind it, and another load of lava plaster, another wall behind it. Yeah, so the internal insulation was limited, would you agree? Loft insulation, again, is a sort of relatively new thing. If you needed any decent loft insulation, it used to involve rolls about this thick to get any decent ventilation, but then it went straight through to the roof. What else? What else? Timber framed, yeah? Benefits and hazards for a timber frame.
The roofs can be less stable.
Less stable, yeah, so less stable structuring. So do you remember that, those in the room, I'm sure some people will remember and stable, that old video, 7 minutes to collapse? Remember it?
Nail plates.
The nail plates on the roof trusses, so light gauge timbers now, they use a lot of lighter woods, a lot of pines and stuff as opposed to the heavy oaks and all that stuff in the past, and held together by little aluminium plates. So under the duress of a fire, they break down really easily. The opportunity for collapse is really quite substantial, and they proved back in the day, there used to be a video out for those that weren't around then that showed the ceiling going to collapse or the roof going to collapse within 7 minutes of the fire starting, which is quite a frightening fact. Anything else, guys? Modern styles? What else might you get on a roof to encourage a quick
Solar
collapse?
panels.
Solar panels, added weight. Yeah, so we've got a lot more weight on buildings, particularly if they've had solar panels added. So the hazards of solar panels. Electricity, yeah, so weight, collapse, they fall away, slide off the roof, it's obviously they're very heavy, and electricity. So electricity wise, anyone in the experience of solar panels got them at home or anything? I'm not a great knowledge.
It's a DC current, isn't it? It goes into
It is, yeah.
So DC is quite dangerous.
DC's the more dangerous of the two for those who don't know electrics. That's the one that tends to encourage you to go towards it rather than away from it. So that's a hazard in itself. And the way it tends to be wired up is that it will either have an isolation point within the roof void or on the outside just below that point. and that's where you switch it off to make sure that the current doesn't go from that point into the building. So means you isolate the building, but you haven't necessarily isolated the panels themselves. They can still generate charge and hold it in the capacitors that are involved in them. So it's still quite a hazard. So some people from aerial stations, we've got something on the run. PV stop. Is everyone aware of PV stop? To be honest with you, a lot of guys missed the email. It came round in, I was still operational at that time. It came round in one of those Ops News things, and we got obviously a fair amount of information because I was on an aerial appliance station. If you wasn't an aerial appliance station, if you didn't read the operational news thoroughly, then you might have missed it. But it's basically a silver fire extinguisher, a normal 9 litre one carried on aerial appliances. That carries, I don't even know how to describe it, kind of like a PVA kind of black solution that comes out and goes like a rubber over the top of the solar panel and stops it generating electricity. And the nice thing for the people that own it, if it doesn't get damaged in the fire, it does peel off afterwards. The only problem with it, I believe it's of limited stock, so, and obviously I think they only carry one.
Yeah, one per truck.
One per truck, so, you know, the one is barely going to do one solar panel, so if you've got 2 or 3, you're going to need 2 or 3 of those to deal with it. So I'm suggesting maybe if it's safe enough to do it with an aerial there may be a sheet over the top that will give you some added health benefits, if you like, or safety mechanisms in place. So what other issues we've got, guys? What other issues we've got with these modern builds? So let's take a look at this compartment here. So it's relatively modern.
Full ceilings.
Ceiling void.
Full ceiling, so all hidden voids, yeah, possibly for smoke and flame travel. They try and keep everything compartmentised as much as possible, but there is the opportunity for it to travel. What about in this compartment now? We haven't got furnishings as such. But what would be the outcome possibly in one of these buildings here, one of these rooms, regarding fire development? Do you think you'd see towards flashover or backdraft, quicker or slower? Quicker.
Yeah.
Definitely to flash over. If ventilated to flash over, if non-ventilated towards possible backdraft situation. Why? Why is that going to happen? A couple of reasons really, but what's the main factor?
It's going to get hotter quicker.
Because
It's the insulation.
the insulation, yeah, so basically the insulation is meaning that the walls are less passive. Yeah, so they're going to get to that point where they stop absorbing heat much quicker and leave more energy within the compartment available to progress the fire. So they're going to get faster development towards the point where it's either going to run out of oxygen, create a situation for a backdraft, or a fast progression to a flashover window for ventilation, or if a window's been left open, a fully ventilated fire. So you can turn up to a fully developed fire much sooner after the fire's started than you would in a traditional building, even though they have ventilation. What other things might be a hazard in that scenario? What's going to see? What's going to bring that about? What about these windows? Yeah, these bifold doors. Triple glazed, bifold doors as they call them now, they're sometimes 3 across. They look lovely, don't you think? I think they look beautiful. Lots of people are having the old Juliet balconies put in their bedrooms as well, which is added ventilation. In a fire, what's the hazard there, do you think? So you're going to get this quick progression because they're not really failure. Yeah, catastrophic failure. They don't tend to fail in the same way as where an old sash window might crack and fall out under the pressure of a fire and the heat. They tend to fail catastrophically, so they'll hold the heat back, hold the pressure back, hold the heat back, hold the pressure back. And then due to the nature of how they're fixed, which is limited, when they do fail, because they're aluminium framed, they're held in by a few screws, not as many as you'd think. And then some of the smaller ones, I believe, they even accept just expanding foam as a means of fixing the smaller ones. You can buy them yourself from B&Qs or wherever you like, and fill it yourself with expanding foam around the outside, which is obviously all going to deteriorate in a fire. Once you've got a large area like that, it falls out, you've got the hazard of falling on someone. Yeah, so that's the hazard. What's the other big hazard of that? That'd be
Massive ventilation.
Yeah.
massive ventilation. You've gone from a fire that's limited to have as much oxygen as you need to develop into a fast progressive fire. So really could get a catastrophic change in the development of that fire in that department if you're unlucky to be coming in the other side of it, and then it ventilates as you come in, and it could be really quite catastrophic. Anything else, guys? Anything you think of? Yeah, we've done the side panels. V-luxes as well, again, they're all areas that you could potentially get added ventilation. What about size of the walls? What's the sort of general flavour of the month at the moment as far as size of rooms?
It's all open plan.
It's all open plan, yeah, so little compartmentisation, if you like, or little containment within a room. So even in a non-ventilated compartment, there's more oxygen available initially to get to that flashover point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So before it requires oxygen from outside, ventilation from outside, there's more initial available oxygen inside the compartment itself, by the nature of how big it is. And because it'll be bigger, it'll have more what in it?
Fuel.
More fuel. It'll have more furnishings in it, so more stuff ready to burn. And the stuff that's ready to burn is going to be substantially different as well. So most modern buildings of that style will have modern furnishings in them. It's natural to have modern furnishings inside modern buildings, generally more traditional furniture in older buildings, wouldn't it? So a lot of these plastics, they break down really, really quickly. If you see by nature, these TVs here, most modern furnishings, low density, so they're very, very thin, so there's limited resistance and high surface area. Yeah, so they'll break down really quickly in a fire. This will break down in the fire really, really quickly. High surface area to receive a lot of heat and limited density to resist that heat, so it'll break down and start to decay really quickly. What they'll also do, by nature of being plastic, you'll release what they call hydrocarbons. Anyone heard of that before, hydrocarbons? They're kinds of petroleum-based kinds of fuels, if you like, or off products that will combust and flame much lower temperatures. So hydrocarbons, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but if you think of carbon monoxide, which is a more traditional off product from more traditional materials, will still be in this compartment burning as well. But for the auto-ignition temperature we're talking about going to full flash over 609 degrees centigrade, for a lot of these modern materials, it can go as low as 450. So you can get a flash over in the compartment at a much lower temperature, which is still not a good thing, just because the temperature's low, you've still got full containment, full involvement within the compartment. So that's going to be a real hazard. So modern furnishings as well. So here's the hazard. So what it's trying to highlight here is obviously within this compartment we've got a steady rise. It's gone up to the point where it's run out of fuel available in the compartment and we've gone into out of natural decay. And as soon as possibly someone makes entrance into that compartment or the windows fail, then this fast rise towards flash over straight away. And some drawings of the furniture again. For some reason. So, another concept that's quite old, coming back into vogue, and it's going to raise a little bit of discussion hopefully. External attack, and when we're talking about external attack, we're talking about externally of the premises, not externally of the compartment. We do cover that as well, but we'll talk about that more tomorrow. So this is the LFB position on external attack. This is an important message, guys, just to ensure that I'm not sure everybody within the authority has got the message so far, but that it is a message that's coming from the authority, that this is a considered method for you to attack fires when the dynamics are right to do so. So I'm going to just let you guys read this, and if you can let me know when you've all finished. Can you all read that okay? Does anyone need me to read it for them? All right, yeah. Already? Yeah, makes sense? Yeah. Sort of, now, you know, pretty much across the board when I've delivered this course, you find some people say, well, we're doing that all the time anyway. And then say to a lot of people, oh, that's a big change. Okay, because the message has been different outside, I think, and some people have carried on practicing external attacks since the advent of pulse spraying, and some have seemed to avoid it a lot and just considered internal attack to be more credible, more safe. And I can understand the reason behind that, because there was a lot of thing back in the day about pushing the fire. Have you heard that? Just pushing it onto the B-18s coming in, pushing the fire back into the building in unburnt areas with an external attack. So that's kind of the people who've been avoiding it for that reason. But there are other people who are out there saying, well, we practice it all the time, we always get a jet off and put it in if it's ventilated. and it's very successful. So, put it to you then, if I can try and convince you of a method of applying an external attack in a safe way, would it be something you consider doing if you're not already? Yeah. Hopefully. Right, this is where you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. We're, as far as I understand it, due to sort of plagiarism, we're not allowed to embed these videos onto our thing, but we are allowed to, what's the word, but when you go and look at them each time. So basically I've got to wait for this to load up directly from YouTube. And I am not, under any stretch of the imagination, an IT whiz.